Hello, Beras. Berabella here. The HoneyCast is excited to present the recording of Berapalooza 2024. This episode features a panel discussing restaking with Serene from EigenLayer, David from Babylon Chain, and Muto from Ethos. Moderated by Smokey the Bear. Enjoy!
BM, folks. Smokey the Bear back here to talk some crap. And I'm joined by some wonderful lads from the world of restaking. Something that I think has recently been pioneered by one of our friends on this panel, and a number of the gents over here are doing a lot of work to take us to the next level. So, we have David from Babylon. We have a masked panda from EigenLayer, who may or may not reveal himself soon. And we have OX Muto from Ethos Stake. So I would love to turn it over to you guys to introduce yourselves, what you guys do, and perhaps to talk a little bit about, what restaking is as a whole. David, you want to start things off?
Hello. So I'm David. I'm a co-founder of Babylon, and we love Bitcoin. And Bitcoin is proof of work, but why can't it become a staking asset? So our protocol is Bitcoin staking.
Awesome.
Hi, everybody. I'm Panda from EigenLayer. EigenLayer is a protocol.
You're not very hearable through the mask, my man. I think it's time. There we go. And we have the mystery reveal. We have Ron from EigenLayer joining us here.
Hey,
Hey, everybody. We have something interesting to say here.
hey, yes, finally. EigenLayer is a mechanism for allowing each stake to be used for securing all kinds of protocols. We are right now on mainnet with staking, and we have an upcoming upgrade coming up soon where we can have services, EigenDA, and operators all coming on mainnet.
Love it. And Muto?
Yep. Hey guys, here from Layer 1 to help power other IBC-enabled blockchains as well.
Love it, guys. Love it. So, I think one of the biggest questions that we think about a lot, because I once had someone describe Berachain as EigenLayer for shitcoins, which I thought was really funny. We've tried to think a lot about what it is that restaking unlocks. Can you guys hear me okay? Fuck. How about now?
Better?
Better?
Yeah.
Okay. The question I had for you guys is, what is it that restaking fundamentally unlocks at the protocol level or at the ecosystem level? Muto, would love for you to start first this time, man.
Yeah. So from my perspective, I think that restaking is actually just another word for shared security. And in general, you have two visions of crypto. One is proof-based world. Other is crypto economic secured world. For crypto economic security, you basically have to stake something like an asset. And the question is, what asset do you stake? And there's also many different qualities of different assets as well. So a very natural kind of goal is to take something that is a higher quality, highly liquid asset and to use it for staking across various different protocols. And I think that's generally what things like Bitcoin and Ethereum staking or restaking are trying to accomplish.
The way we think about it at EigenLayer is that the EigenLayer is a system of careful crypto economic security. So when you have many services sharing a common pool of security, we need careful accounting of who owns how much security. How do you make sure that you're not over leveraged or under leveraged? How do you make sure you just get enough security? All of these calculations are maintained by the EigenLayer protocol. So this allows, just like Amazon has elastic cloud, which means you can buy as much compute as needed. EigenLayer is elastic scaling of security. So you can buy as much security as necessary. Why would you buy security in ETH rather than some other asset? You buy security in the asset in which you're taking risks. Imagine your risks are denominated in ETH, and ETH is this asset that has a lot of monetary premium. So if your risks are denominated in ETH, it is much better to take the collateral also in ETH because the cross volatility between these two is minimized. So that's why EigenLayer focuses on ETH staking and ETH-derived security. But the broader thing that we unlock is because we can now have systems that can build without bringing security on their own, lots of innovators can come up and build new and interesting systems. And creating these systems don't need to be chains in the EigenLayer view. All of these are just services. They do a particular task, but do it really, really well. Like, for example, you can have an AI, which basically an AI co-processor that brings in AI information, like, run all the previous trades into your system and bring up, like, how should you provision liquidity into various things. This might be an AI co-processor. This is not a chain. This is just a service that is serving already existing chains in the Ethereum ecosystem. So that's the core idea of EigenLayer. How do we create insured, secure services which can all interoperate to create something greater than the sum of the parts?
So when we think about our Babylon's contribution to this whole staking, restaking landscape, I think our main contribution is not actually restaking, but staking. Because Bitcoin is a very interesting asset because it's actually secured by proof of work. And so the asset itself is actually not securing anything. And for the first time, our protocol allows that asset to be used as a staking asset. So I feel like our main sort of product is this staking as a primitive for Bitcoin. Now, once you stake, then you can follow, EigenLayer thinking. You can restake to many, many protocols, but restaking is kind of on top of the staking.
Okay, I love it. So tell me a little bit more, guys. When you think about restaking shared security within the world of institutional investors, which are increasingly taking more and more interest in the space upon ETF approvals, et cetera, what role do you think restaking plays in the future of almost retail or traditional institutions in crypto?
I can start this one. When you think about restaking, so the question is, how does restaking play a role in institutional adoption? And when you think about institutions want to get rewards at minimal possible risk. And when you look at a lot of DeFi is underwriting price risks. That's the fundamental thing, that when you're putting some collateral or in a lending protocol or market making in like a DEX, you are essentially underwriting some kind of price risk. Whereas when you're doing validation, which is what EigenLayer and staking and restaking generally focus on, is that you're underwriting a very limited kind of risk, which is validation risk, which means when you stake, you're promising that you're not going to do malicious activities when validating the protocol. And what this means is, for institutions, this is one of the least risk opportunities, because they can have a highly trusted operator who can actually take these assets and then promise that they will never violate these covenants. And it is up to them to not violate the covenants and therefore never get slashed. So that's really, I think, what we're seeing unlock with restaking and institutional adoption. Institutions are much easier to understand this low risk level and come in, and then over time they'll understand all the other things that is going in the crypto space and therefore participate.
Yeah, so I agree with that. So in finance, there's this concept called risk-free rate, which is basically the interest rate you do in putting short-term deposit. So staking yield is like the analog for crypto of a risk-free yield, where you don't have to take market risk. And for our project, which focuses on Bitcoin, so institutional investors, obviously, many of them have a lot of Bitcoin, right now earning hardly any yield. And so this ability of staking Bitcoin would provide this risk-free yield possibility for institutions. So, of course, having institution buy-in is a very long-term thing, and but that's sort of a vision that we have.
Cool. Now, I guess for a little bit of a spicier question here, guys, who should not be using shared security, restaking, whatever form you'd like to think of it as, right? Who is not a fit for that, utility set, if you will?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting question. Specifically, like talking about what does restaking provide and what are the kind of incentives for using something like this. I think there's like two ways you can look at blockchains. Certainly, like one way to look at blockchains is or actually there's two ways to look at crypto protocols. Certainly, like some crypto protocols, like they don't necessarily need to have cryptoeconomic security. Lots of things with proof-based security. So anything that is not in kind of cryptoeconomic security world, like obviously Restake doesn't necessarily apply to that. And so maybe there is going to be a shorter term effect of like many protocols trying to integrate with Restake. Maybe it's a very large narrative, but I do think like there are some places where cryptoeconomic security is like very natural. I do think the things that where, there's kind of a bigger topic of like, if I have Restake security, which is you're getting exogenous security from an external ecosystem, and where that security comes from is the productivity and stability of that ecosystem being exported through the token. What does my native token do? And I think this is like kind of an interesting question of like, why do people start blockchain protocols? One way to think about this is like protocols and blockchains should be as secure as possible. Part of it is cryptoeconomic security, so maybe restaking becomes a standard. Another way to think about this is like blockchains don't necessarily make sense from an incentives perspective unless the native token is like very valuable as well. And maybe like a good interim solution to something like this is like dual staking methods within Cosmos. There's mesh security. I know that EigenLayer has their own dual staking proposals. And also, David is also very involved with mesh security as well in Cosmos. So I think like seeing how that evolves is a huge part of like whether people want to align with restaking or not.
When should you not use shared security? You should not use shared economic security if economic security is not very useful. For example, you have actions that are the fundamental actions that are risky cannot be slashed for. Right. So, for example, you may have a service that is doing certain things that you simply cannot slash for. Then economic security doesn't really add anything to you. But there may still be benefit for you to use a common decentralized validator set. Okay, so when is it bad to use a common decentralized validator set? You need some nuanced conditions for what you need these validators to be. Maybe you need them to be from your own community. Maybe you need these validators to actually be KYC'd, or maybe you need them to be non-US participants. Whatever kinds of constraints you have, then just going with shared security may not be sufficient. But one of the things we do at EigenLayer is what we call double opt-in. Both the staker has to opt into the service and the service has to agree to that staker. So this lets you express all kinds of complex preferences. So for a lot of use cases, you can still extract something out of this common framework. Another thing is the native token. If you had a native token and you want to do value accrual, EigenLayer has dual staking, which enables you to both have the native token, but also borrow some amount of security from ETH, and you can retune how much you can get security from each of these different coins.
Yeah, so I agree that the core restaking is slashing. So if the slashing rules are very subjective, for example, like an oracle, where the majority can slash the minority, where the majority may not be right. It could be the minority that's right. So that leads to a lot of problematic thing. So yeah, so I think that's the.
Yeah, very fair, guys. Another area that we haven't talked about perhaps as much to date, I want to say, within the restaking space, but one that is definitely of interest is the MEV landscape around restaking, shared security as a whole. What do you see as the implications of these sorts of new primitives on the MEV landscape as a whole? What do you see as friendly MEV? What do you see as toxic MEV in this sort of a restaking shared security world?
So if I understand it correctly, the question is how restaking applies to MEV and stuff. I actually think that I've actually looked into this quite a bit. It's like another interest of mine. Has very little to do with, potentially has somewhat to do with Ethos, but and specifically, I think that there's this overlap between restaking markets and validator markets. So specifically in Ethos, like you have validators and we have kind of full guarantees over the validator set of a Cosmos chain. The Cosmos chain is almost like a very small version of something very large like the Ethereum chain. And there's also this other world of like what can be done with restaking if you have that as a primitive. Maybe it's a slashing conditions for validators to commit to some things. Maybe you can start building like new constructs over validator sets to control things like MEV, pre-confirmations, etc. So I do think the long-term implications of what can you do with restaking once like a lot of validators are on some type of restaking platform is really interesting. But I think it's hard to tell is like my perspective.
I'm going to talk about the impact, how we can use restaking to actually change the landscape of MEV. So one of the main things that if you're staked in a certain, let's say in the Ethereum protocol, you only agree that you make blocks, valid blocks. You do not have any constraints on how you have to include transactions, in what order you have to include transactions. Can you pre-confirm certain transactions? All of these things are not included in the Ethereum protocol. And in general, in many, many protocols, you have these degrees of freedom. What you can do with something like restaking is actually modulate the MEV landscape by making credible commitments, promises that you will not violate a certain kind of ordering guarantee. For example, I can promise to you that I sell you a portion of the block. And if I don't actually honor my commitment, I will lose my stake. I may promise to you that whenever you can give me a limit order or an event-driven action, and if I don't take that action, when my block proposal slot comes up, I will get slashed. You can make commitments that you include transactions that are coming into an encrypted mempool so that I have not seen the contents of your transaction before inclusion. So you can do all these kinds of really interesting things using EigenLayer on something like Ethereum.
I wish I have some good ideas to contribute, but it's so noisy that I can't think here anymore. So I'll leave it at 3 points.
Sorry, guys. I'm just trying to get this as close to my face as possible. Okay. So, I think the biggest question I have for you guys is, what does this look like, or what does the world look like if each of your protocols succeed in the end game that you're looking at, right? David, do you have all the Bitcoin in existence, allowing it to be staked? Shriram, is ETH powering just about everything in the world? Muto, have you fixed the Cosmos hub? What is a world where you guys win look like?
So Bitcoin is a 1 trillion asset. Okay, guys, 1 trillion. And these guys are not paying attention. Even a 1 trillion number is not paying attention. So
$1 trillion.
So we're hoping that will become sort of a one big foundation for security of the entire crypto ecosystem. If we do things right, it will become bigger and bigger. The pie will become bigger and bigger, and Bitcoin will be useful in providing security. So that's the vision.
Our vision is not so much as to how much stake actually accrues on EigenLayer. Our vision is for open innovation. And open innovation means if you are a developer, if you are an innovator, if you are a marketer, how do we all come together to produce useful and interesting outputs? And what are the coordination mechanisms that EigenLayer can offer? We are starting by doing staking and restaking, but this is not the end game. This is the beginning. We will create more and more coordination mechanisms for all kinds of players to come together and create more and more useful products. A simple example of it is, can we replicate the cloud on a decentralized system? Can we have, each service that is running actually make credible commitments and immutable long-term guarantees to users, to other services that can then credibly build on top of them? These are the kinds of questions we think about the most.
Yeah, and I think for Ethos, the answer is actually maybe a subset of what EigenLayer's answer is. But in many ways, I think a huge part of what this particular ABS is trying to do is it's worth noting that even before EigenLayer and Babylon, the concept of shared security actually started amongst L1 blockchains and Cosmos. And this idea has been here for quite some time. And there's been a lot of, I think, really interesting thinking, but not necessarily a lot of, I think, projects coming to production, being scalable. And for those reasons, I think shared security is actually taken off a lot more quickly outside of Cosmos than within. My end vision is that building kind of consensus out of Ethereum protocol is going to be relatively useful for some number of people. Building L1s, co-processors, building in the Cosmos ecosystem or ecosystem outside of Ethereum. And maybe all of those things, so if you're building something that has consensus and you need security, you have the true kind of end vision of what shared validation would look like through something like Ethos. But in many ways, I think like also there's many other theses that I think Ethos is also playing into. So it really matters on how a lot of other stuff plays out as well.
Cool. And I'll ask one more question. That's the VC classic that you guys have probably all heard way too many times, but you guys are influencing an industry or influencing some of the largest asset classes within a rapidly emerging industry, right? Bitcoin, Ethereum, the Cosmos ecosystem, etc. What is it that keeps you guys up at night about your protocol or what you're working on? What is it that keeps you guys up at night?
Security. Security is what keeps us up at night. It's one of the hardest things in crypto. Actually, the security model that we are facing here is insane, unbelievable. You have an open source system. So of course, the attacker can look at all your code. Open source is a principle that we value, so we can't even get rid of it. Open state, which means the attacker looks at the particular position of the execution and knows the vulnerable moment to actually attack the protocol. Open state is a value, so we can't get rid of it. Open entry, an attacker has red carpet to come in and take any assets that are open. Why? Because we value censorship resistance. Open entry is a principle, so we can't compensate, we can't compromise it. So the attacker has a red carpet. Open exit, which means I came in, I did the attack, now I have a red carpet to walk out because immutability is a principle in blockchain. So we have 4 principles: open source, open state, open entry, open exit, and I am an open innovation maxi, which means I want all of us to go create new kinds of interesting applications. Now you put all of these together, it's a toxic cocktail. For the attacker, anybody can come in and come and do all kinds of stuff. How do we secure these systems? This is something we obsess about, but it's not easy, and I don't think any of us have a good answer right now.
Yeah, so a system like Bitcoin staking, right? It's like a double-sided security system. You have to provide security to the supplier of stake. You also have to provide security to the chains and the AVS. So it's a really big challenge, and we don't want to lose people's Bitcoin.
Security.
Okay, I feel like security is kind of important here. Okay, guys, I think my last question is, how many points do I get for moderating this panel?
What kind of points? EigenLayer points?
I'm getting all the points, right? Okay, guys, jokes aside, thank you so much. Also for dealing with the AV issues. Love you all. And guys, if you're looking at the future of shared security, restaking, all the words in between, these guys are here to kill it. Thanks so much, guys.
Thanks for tuning in. The next step features a panel discussing Future of Crypto with Nick White from Celestia, Sareem from EigenLayer, and Primo from Layer 0. See you on the next one.